Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marci Nettles, and I am your host. And I am so honored to be able to bring you these amazing guests with such phenomenal stories. And the reason why is because I truly believe that stories can save lives. I know you might be going, Marci, that's a little dramatic, isn't it? Well, no, I truly do. I believe that it can save your life. Because wherever you're at right now, if you're not completely 100% sold out and happy and feeling like you're doing what your purpose is, then you aren't living your life and you're losing it. And so I want to help save your life by bringing these stories to you that should hopefully bring you hope, direction, and potentially something that you can decide to do yourself that will take you from this breakdown situation you might find yourself in and help you break through into the dream life or the fulfilled life, whatever life you are looking for. And so my guest today, I'm so excited to have him here with you. His name is Tim Eggebraaten. He has nearly 28 years in the criminal justice field. He brings a wealth of experience to his role as a captivating national speaker. From his beginnings as a correctional officer in 1989 to his tenure as chief of police, Tim's journey is a testament to his expertise in working the beat. Retiring from law enforcement in 2016, Tim embraced the title of off-duty chief, passionately taking his message, music, and talent to the streets. His compelling storytelling and witty perspective on balance, growth, leadership, and life make him a sought-after keynote speaker on the national stage. Tim's unique approach combines his love for music with his motivational message, taking audiences on an emotional roller coaster. From light-hearted anecdotes to profound insights on loss and mental health, Tim engages and inspires. Based in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, Tim shares his life with his wife, Denise, relishing the outdoors, friendships, and family moments with their adult children and two grandsons. So I am so excited to be able to welcome Tim to the show today. Sorry about the little bit of tongue tie there, but you know what I love about that? I love it when I get tongue tied a little bit because I have people ask me so often, it's like, Marci, how can you be a podcaster? How do you do that? How can you just speak so well? I'm like, I don't always speak so well, but I do it anyway. Right, Tim? Well, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Marcy. And you do speak more gooder than I do. So that's even better.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, guys, that means that you should either be speaking and telling your story or helping somebody tell their story, being a podcaster yourself. Because if we can do it, you absolutely can. So, Tim and I decided that the title of his episode would be You're in a Toxic Environment. What now? So, Tim, could you please share a little bit more about who you are and maybe even give us some insight on why you decided on a career in law enforcement?
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity and what a treat this is. So I was born and raised in a small town of about 400 people in northwest Minnesota, and the youngest of four. I had three older sisters, and then mom and dad got it right with the favorite son, and it was amazing being the favorite son. But I knew in kindergarten and even maybe before kindergarten that I was going to be a police officer. It was a calling for me, and I remember seeing a picture of think it was one of my mom's cousins or something when I was very little, and he was in Washington State trooper hat and uniform, and I thought, wow, I don't even know what that is, but I knew at a very early age that I wanted to be a police officer, and I actually reconnected with my kindergarten teacher last year, and she told me, I remember when you were in kindergarten, and I knew you were going to be a police officer. So uh, growing up in a small community, and mom and dad were both very positive people and very influential, and just, I am, I can, I will was my mom's motto, and so I grew up wanting to help people and do the right thing, and I started working in corrections, and then I got a job as a police officer in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. So it's east of Fargo, North Dakota, about an hour, and small town, about 8,500 people, and we fell in love with the area. My wife and I have been married 35 years this June, and so she followed me, which was a big deal. Followed my career. She had her career in banking, and we moved to Detroit Lakes. We thought it was going to be a 1 year stop, and here we are 34 years later, still here. And we have three adult sons, and two of them are married, and one of them gave us two grandsons, and then the other one, the youngest, is living in Arizona for the moment, and he's a nomad. He's just going to be wandering around the country on a mission to seek out all of the U.S. national parks, and he's got a YouTube channel and everything else. But it's been a fun, amazing life, and having the criminal justice field for almost 28 years with corrections and police work. It was amazing, and it was a lot of highs and a lot of lows, as you would imagine. And just like all of us, we have that. There was some really beautiful moments, and there were some just horrible, gut wrenching moments. And but everything led us to right where we're at right now in this whole life, and love every minute of it along the way, and thankful for every minute of it along the way too.
Yeah, I love that. Well, first of all, I love that you knew who you were going to be when you grew up in
Yeah.
kindergarten. That's amazing. And that you stuck with it. It's like for me, I changed
Mhm.
from one thing to another, to another, to another, and finally landed in law enforcement as well.
Yeah.
But congratulations on 35 years of marriage.
Yeah.
That is
Most,
fantastic. Yes,
yes. Yeah.
that is something to celebrate. Celebrate. That's a big thing to celebrate. There's
Yeah.
a reason why we celebrate our anniversaries every year is because to get to 35, it takes 35 years, right? And
Yeah.
so celebrating the smaller things actually has this big old fireworks explosion of happy hormones inside of our heads. And
Yeah.
when we do that, our brains get attracted and addicted to how that feels, and they want you to do more of it. So
Yeah.
sticking it out, you gotta celebrate, right?
Well, no, it was
Congratulations.
definitely a team effort. It's a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation, and just the whole, I'll meet you halfway, and sometimes I'm going to meet you all the way, and all of that, and with the ups and the downs and everything else, it's been a beautiful 35 years. Looking forward to the next 35. Bring them on.
Absolutely. It takes so much sacrifice. And with that, I know this is not the topic we're gonna be talking about, but if you could give one tip to a younger couple, maybe even a couple that's married for 10 years, like we
Mhm.
have been, what would be your one tip to married couples?
Be curious and genuinely curious, and ask questions. What's going on, or why do you feel that way, or how do you feel about, and when you start that conversation, don't start it with the idea that, I'm going to catch my partner in something, and I'm going to, yeah, but don't you think that, and so go into it honestly, and with genuine curiosity, and get to know your partner. And I think that's a big step for all of us, and not only in a marriage or a relationship, but with people, when we're talking about politics or something. And I think that's one thing that we're missing nowadays, is that genuine curiosity about, well, tell me more about that, Marci. What where are you going with that, or what is your thought process on that? And then asking that question, and then zipping it up, and then listening to the answer, with no judgment, and just like not waiting to pounce and say, "Oh yeah, but yeah, I knew you were going to say that, Marci, but you know what? You're wrong, and you're an idiot for thinking that way." And I see so much of that argument, and that does kind of tie into like law enforcement and toxic work environments, where if we're not like genuinely curious about other people that we're working with or living with, and we automatically assume that we're the right ones and they're wrong, and that's just contentious all the way around, and it enhances that us versus them mindset. It's us against
Yeah.
the world, and
Yeah, yeah, that is so important to point out. I think that in life in general, if we could be more curious about everything, we would
right,
open up so many doors and
yeah,
opportunities that could expand our lives and our experiences, not just for
mhm,
ourselves, but our families and everybody around us. So I love that curiosity aspect. And then thank you for tying it in to your career in law enforcement, because
yeah,
being in law enforcement before myself, I found myself towards the end of my career, becoming a little bit more cynical
Oh yeah,
about people,
yeah,
and it's just that I think it's probably a normal thing if you're not fully conscious and making decisions to keep yourself away from that. But
yeah.
can you share an experience that you had that may have helped you course correct from the us versus them that you mentioned, that mindset?
Oh, absolutely. One that really sticks out in my mind. I'm sure there were a lot along the way, but pretty early on in my career, I was deep into that us versus them mindset. I mean, it was my night shift partners and myself. We were the us against the world, and even my administration, my sergeants, my captains, they were like, oh, they forgot what it's like. And you get that we're going to take on the world mentality. And I remember, and that wasn't how I was raised at all. It was a product of the culture, maybe of the work culture. I don't know, but then early on, I got a call to go to our Holiday Inn in town, and there was a guy there, and my dispatcher, his voice matched my attitude because we feed off each other all the time, and he was like, "Yeah, go to the Holiday Inn, check out this guy, figure out what he needs, and move him along." And I'm like, 10-4, and I'm a cop in the mean streets of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and
Yeah, well, this is
and
not
uh,
Detroit, Michigan. We're not talking about Detroit,
no,
Michigan.
not even close. Like, yeah, we had 12 officers at that time and very small community. And but in my mind, it was us versus them. And I got there and I met this gentleman in his mid 60s, and I could see his gray hair. And I mean, I can see him now when I'm talking about him and relaying the story. I can see him in my mind, and he's skinny and mid 60s and gray hair, and I can see his brown eyes, and there was just something powerful about those eyes. And he had a white plastic Walmart bag right next to his little brown dress shoes, and so I knew that that white plastic Walmart bag probably contained his life's possessions. And so I started talking to him, and he was just this humble, kind of confused man. He was actually on his way on a bus from Minneapolis, Minnesota to Detroit, Michigan, and he saw a sign that said Detroit Lakes, and he thought he was there, and he thought, oh, it only took a few hours. And so he was like 900 miles short of Detroit, Michigan. And so they dropped him off at Walmart. He lost his jacket right away in the men's room, and he was confused. And so somebody gave him a ride to the Holiday Inn. And when I was talking to him, he was just this started chipping away at this crust of mine that I'd already started to develop, that crust that we can build around ourselves to insulate us from getting hurt, emotionally, or getting attached to somebody. And then ended up giving him a ride to a different hotel and introduced him to the night clerk as Stormin' Norman. And he was just, his shoulders kind of shrunk, and he just said, I'm not Stormin', I'm just Norman. And he was just this kind, gentle man. And on my way out, after I filled out my paperwork, I was leaving, and he said, "Wait a minute." And then I stopped and looked at him, and he looked at me with those beautiful brown eyes of his. And it seemed like a long time that we were locked in each other's gaze, but I know it was just a few seconds. And we're staring at each other, and he just said to me, "I want to remember the people who have helped me." And he could have knocked me over with a little push, and it struck me, and I just broke my gaze with him. I had no response for him. I got in my police car and I started to cry. And this was a guy that was tough, and I don't believe that crying is a sign of weakness, but at that stage of my life, I didn't cry ever. And now I cry at Disney movies, so there's that. But and I was sobbing, and I remember thinking to myself, who have I become? Because that officer in that police car was not the Tim Eggebraaten that Kenny and Pat Eggebraaten from Fisher, Minnesota, raised to be caring and thoughtful and conscientious. And somewhere along that early path, I'd lost sight of that. And this kind and gentle man uh, rocked my world just by being himself. And so when I'm speaking with organizations and talking with people and sharing stories like Norman's story, I remind them that these Normans and the Normas are everywhere. They're around us all the time, but so much of our days we're like busy and our head is down and we're just like focused on doing what we have to do, and we miss these people. And then I remind people too that each and every one of us has an opportunity to be a Norman or a Norma for somebody else just by how we show up, the words that are coming out of our mouth, the words that are coming out of our keyboard as we're typing into social media. And when we see these people, I don't believe they happen by accident. You and I share a faith of that these people are put into our lives. I believe that events happen for us, not to us. And when these events are happening for us, and when these people are put into our lives, like Normans and Normas, in my mind, it was God that put Norman into my life because I was floundering, and Norman shook me by the shirt, basically, and said, "Wake up, focus." And so that was probably, I remember his brown eyes and his brown dress shoes the most vivid, and his gray hair a little bit, but those eyes. And when I talk to other people, when I'm curious about other people's stories and they're telling me, and when they have a similar, I think Norman was an angel. I know he was a real person. I found out some information about him afterwards, but when I meet people like that, and when people talk and share stories about people that have influenced them and rocked their world, a lot of times they talk about the person's eyes. And there's just something about their eyes. And Norman's eyes, and I can't put it into words other than spiritual. I mean, there's something powerful about those brown eyes. And so, so that was early on in my career. And of course, throughout the career, I had ups and downs. But I kept going back in my mind to this beautiful soul and a guy named Norman. So,
Wow. I think that his eyes, those types of eyes are the ones that look into your soul.
right.
They're not just looking at you, they're looking into your soul because they have
Absolutely.
such an important impact to make on your life. So after this experience with your angel Norman, how did you change and how did you change and show up differently as a law enforcement officer?
I think it I think it brought me back to why I wanted to get into law enforcement in the first place. And then of course, like I said, through my career there were times where I would get back into that us versus them mindset, and then I would lose sight of that. But so many times, and then like throughout my whole career, my faith kept me grounded. My music kept me grounded, kept me. I could be in just a horrible, crabby mood and pick up my guitar and start playing something, and it would help me recenter. And then I discovered mindfulness later on through life, and meditation, and then combining that whole prayerful meditation. But I like everybody. You have your ups and your downs, but I think his like introduction to me and his being inserted into my life, or made my eyes more open for other opportunities, like who else, and these people, that these Normans and these Normas, most of the time it's not a blatant like, oh, here's your sign, look at that person. Sometimes it's just somebody we meet in passing, or they're holding a door open, or we don't even have a conversation with the people, but they're everywhere. And so that was part of what got me through a whole career. Which, law enforcement, as you know, it can be pretty toxic at times, and you get that nobody calls 911 to say that their son got an A on his report card. I mean, it's always putting out people's emergency fires, and helping them with through a crisis.
Yeah.
And you can get that mindset that, oh, the world is full of a bunch of dirt bags, and it's
Yeah.
not. And so
No,
it's
it's not.
it's just it's that it kind of helped keep me grounded, and helped keep me focused on reality.
Well, I think that God placed him in your life that early in your career, knowing that you were going to need it because law enforcement is a hard, hard
Yeah,
place to find yourself. I mean, because you are showing up to when people's worst days are happening, not, when they're celebrating things, right? And
right.
so, I know that we also have similarities in our relationship with alcohol. My experience started when I was a very young teenager. And then it was a coping mechanism for me throughout my life. Can you share with the What Now tribe what your relationship with alcohol has been like and when it started and what helped you to really unravel what was going on inside of you?
Absolutely, and thanks for bringing that up. So I was 12 years old when I first had my first drink, and and I was a kid that was very I was content playing with my Hot Wheels cars in my house, and I'd look out the window and I'd see kids playing on the football field, or kids my age even, and at the time I just thought, well, I didn't understand like why I was okay, and I turned out I'm very introverted, which people that know me are like, you're not introverted, and I'm like, well, yeah, I am, but it's not a bad thing. And so I was very content just hanging out in my house, playing with my toys. And but at 12 years old, I met up with a group of friends, and we had a little camp out party. And somebody passed around some cherry sloe gin, and it tasted like cough syrup. It was nasty, but I caught my first buzz, and I recognized that I was one of the guys, and it leveled the playing field. Where before I thought, I don't know if I really fit in with these guys, or but it leveled the playing field, and then it just kind of grew from there, and it grew like a monster, and where I'd get into uncomfortable situations. When I was a freshman in high school, I went to like a senior keg party, and it was actually the summer before my freshman year. And so then that freshman year, when I was walking around the high school, and the seniors that saw me at that party would say, "Hey, I remember you," and they were mostly poking fun at me, but in my mind, it was like, okay, I'm on the same plane with these seniors, these big kids. And then that just went all the way through my career, and I was very insecure and I didn't recognize it. And it was like, as a police officer, I'd go to conferences and thinking, I don't belong here. I mean, these guys are smart, and there's Phoenix PD is here, and that's a big police department, and or Minneapolis, and LAPD, and it's like, oh, they're way better than I am. And but then put a Miller Lite in my hand, or a whiskey or something, and then it was like I could have the confidence to go up and talk to them, and that went all the way through my career. Then I found it as a coping mechanism when we get really good at pushing the trauma down, and when because we're experiencing things that we hope most people don't have to experience, and I would just shove that down and then and drink through it. And so that went on and on and on. And when I was 19, I was arrested for DWI after leaving a party. And then, so I went 31 years or 32 years with no driving infractions, but I drove drunk plenty of times. And the hypocrisy is not, I'm not blind to it. I recognize it. That here I was an active DWI enforcer. It was one of my things. It was part of my us versus them, and very active traffic enforcement. And then I'd go party that night and drive drunk. Just but you don't think clearly like that. And then I retired at the age of 50, and then before my 51st birthday, I got another DWI, and so I was recently retired, and I was thankful for that, and I was thankful for the DWI, and but that was in whatever year it was, a few years ago, 7, 8 years ago, and that was the end of my relationship with alcohol. And then when I started writing my book, uh, I had heard that by writing down and journaling and writing your story, that you discover parts of yourself, and that exploded on me. I mean, I was unraveling, like, why do I drink? And I didn't understand that insecurity piece of it, that because people see me on the outside looking at me, and they think that I'm a confident person, and chief of police, and musician, a one man band, and doing all these things, and but on the inside I get that imposter syndrome, just like everybody else does. Like in this book, I mean, holy smokes, it scared the life out of me that I'm going to be sharing these stories with complete strangers, and how are they going to react? And so all of that just to help me unravel that, and made me sit with it, like, okay, well, why do we do the things we do? And once I started to understand that and allow myself forgiveness, like, hey,
Mm.
yeah, I screwed up, and so does everybody else. But it's like when you own that and you say, you know what, I'm responsible for my actions. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming the job. I'm not blaming anything. It was on me. And but it really helped kind of slow everything down in my head, and then made me more confident, actually, in the sense that I know I'm broken. I know but I'm not worthless. And the people that I dealt with as a police officer weren't worthless. A lot of times I treated them like they were, and I feel bad about that. But recognizing now that they're broken just like I am, and that we're exactly on the same plane. So that
Yeah.
was a fun and interesting journey, that whole writing part.
Yeah, no, that's so good because, journaling itself, whether you're writing a book or not, can really get you into that heart space of recognizing who you truly are and what has created you. I
Right,
mean, one of the things, starting alcohol at the age of 12, there's science out there that says that the younger a person is that they're introduced to alcohol, the stronger the hold it will have on them throughout their lives.
right.
That was my experience. And I think that there's a lot of you and me's out there that are in their mid 50s or somewhere
Yeah,
in there that we're
yep.
realizing these things. And it's like, and I truly believe it's God bringing it to our attention that it's time
Oh
to
yeah,
change it and to take ownership of it and make
yeah,
a decision because I've also done that for myself, made that decision. But I also love that you said that you are thankful
yeah.
for that last DUI or
Oh yeah,
DWI. So
yeah.
why were you thankful for it?
Because I was on a collision course. I mean, it would have continued, and I look at my whole life as like a big puzzle, and it's still there's pieces being added, but there were pieces that were added, like warnings that, hey, you need to wake up, throughout my whole life, and I would recognize them. Even the night I got arrested, when I was 51 years old, when I got into my car, there was an ad playing on the radio, and it was Budweiser, and the ad was a public service announcement, and it was, if you drink, designate. And I remember hearing that, and how many times do we hear that? And I just like, yeah, right. And so all of these puzzle pieces, and that arrest, the arresting officer, I had never met. He was a canine handler. I was a canine handler in the day, and so I asked him who his supervisor was that was working, and he told me. And that supervisor is a friend of mine, and he said, "Do you want me to call my sergeant over?" I said, "Please don't." And uh, and I was just like, okay. And that was like that moment of reality that at first I was kind of hoping for some professional courtesy, like, you know what, hey brother, yeah, just give me a ride home. And but I knew, because of all these other puzzle pieces that had been put in, and the picture was getting more clear, that I had a serious problem with this alcohol, and it was more than just like getting together with some friends once in a while and tossing back a couple. There were every music gig I did, I was drinking to excess, and I thought that was part of the gig. And so when he put the cuffs on me and put me in the car, and it was like, all right, game on. I mean, this is real. And calling my wife and hearing her cry, it broke my heart. And I'm like, you know, what a jerk. And so it was a wake up call, but it wasn't the wake up call. I mean, it was like the final puzzle piece in that little puzzle of the alcohol relationship, and so I'm thankful for it. And I met this officer about a year later at a music gig I was doing, and the sheriff of that county came up, and this guy had gone over to the sheriff's office, and so the sheriff came up with his entourage, and I gave the sheriff a hug. He's a dear friend, and I introduced myself to this officer Mike, or Deputy Mike at that time. He said, "Oh, we've met." And I looked at his name tag, and I'm like, "Brother, bring it in." And yeah, and so was, and I've stayed in contact with him a few times since then. But uh, I mean, I thank him from the bottom of my heart because it wasn't. It was hard for him. I put him in a crappy situation because that brother and sisterhood is real, as you know. And we may be out of the game of law enforcement, but there's still a connection there, a bond, and that I hope never goes away. But
Yeah,
so I felt horrible putting him in that position.
you know what though, and I agree with you because it's tough when we put our brothers and sisters that have that responsibility in that position. And yet you chose not to let your ego take control and ask for that supervisor because more than likely you probably would have gotten off.
Oh, yeah,
And yet, if you had gotten off the next time, that call that your wife would have gotten probably would have been that you were in an accident
right,
and that someone was hurt badly or killed.
right.
So this wake up call, that is definitely something to be grateful for.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's how I look at my entire career, my entire life. Uh, we all have like really good days. Today in northern Minnesota, the sun is shining. It's gorgeous, and sunny and 68 degrees or something ridiculous. It's perfect, light breeze, but everybody has stuff going on in their life, and we know we're going to have days that are cloudy and rainy, and then in our own emotions too, where there's just, whether it's a diagnosis of a health issue or a friend or a family member going through something horrible, or we have a decision to make, and it's just, we all have something. And so I look back on that personal history of those decisions and the trauma that I experienced as a police officer, and I'm thankful for all of that because here we are. I'm talking with Marci Nettles on a podcast. Are you kidding me?
Woohoo,
Yeah. I
woohoo.
mean, and none of this would probably happen had not I experienced those things, and I am truly thankful for them.
Yeah, well, it just reinforces what you said earlier, that all of these things that we find ourselves in that we may not really enjoy, it's
Right.
not happening to you, it's happening for you. It's all your perspective and how you choose to move
Hmm.
forward from it, right? And you are such a positive person. I absolutely love it. And you've already mentioned your mom and the I can, and I will. But
Yeah.
really, what role has positivity played in your life? And really, how did it start? How did it grow? And how can we encourage it in other people?
Yeah, it started with my mom and dad, and I recognize not everybody has that or had that, growing up. So I'm thankful for that. And mom and dad were both very positive. Dad was 6'2", big guy, strong as a horse, and mom was 5 foot nothing, and just and she was one of those optimists that honestly was kind of annoying at times, or it'd be like she'd call me up and she'd be the type of person to be like, Timmy, how was your day? And I'd say, Mom, today was a tough one. We had this accident or whatever, and this guy lost his eyesight. He'll never see his kids. And she'd be the kind of person that would be like, oh, but just think of how good his sense of smell will become. I'm like, Mom, can you tone it down just a bit? And so some people will use the excuse that, well, I'm a realist. I'm a realist, and that's just another excuse, I think, for being negative. That I'm very much a realist as well, because today it is sunny, and I am in a good mood because I choose to be, certain things. But so they instilled that at a very young age, of that positivity. My mom's, one of her mottos was, I am, I can, I will. And she would repeat that. And when she like walked the talk, when she got her cancer diagnosis, I am going to beat this, I can beat this, I will beat this. And when it got time toward the end, where we knew it was going to be the end, her focus shift. I am going to meet Jesus. I can meet Jesus. I will meet Jesus. So it didn't change. That mindset was still very focused. And somebody asked me yesterday at an event I was talking at, and they asked me about my faith. And I don't when I'm speaking on a public stage, I rarely bring up my faith. I mention when I talk about Norman, I say God put Norman into my life. That's about the only mention. But people will come up to me afterwards and they'll say, I knew you were a Christian. Like it's a secret society or something. And like, well, yeah, I am, but it's so yesterday somebody asked me about my faith, like when did it start? And my parents like brought me to church, but I know that at some point we make the decision, when it can be modeled for us, but I remember at a very young age like walking around town or walking from school home or whatever, and having conversations with God. And it was real conversations, where I'd be like casual, like you and I are talking. And I'm very thankful, and I would just remember like, hey God, thank you for this today, and I do it today. I mean, it's like just a couple weeks ago, I was trucking through the airport trying to get to the next gate, and my hip hurt, and I was like, I didn't make it. I didn't make it to the gate, but I was like, the whole time I was boogieing through, I'm like, hey, God, thank you for the opportunity to still be mobile, and that I'm able to motivate still, and but so that faith piece has always been there, and and that was instilled by my parents. But then it's it's grown even more because of how I look at things, when and then filtering certain things too. Like I like the internet, and I'm good at researching and doing things like that. But like social media, I'm kind of pushing that away. I don't watch much of the news. I know what's happening in my community and my country, but I don't like sit with it all the time because it's toxic, and it's not reality. And somebody asked me yesterday too, what can we do for our police officers, to let them know that we appreciate them? I'm like, well, thank them. Or if you get a speeding ticket, don't start ragging on them, and take the speeding ticket. But it's so much of it is perspective, and how we show up on our daily life, and that speaks more than the stuff that's coming out of our mouth. And when people see you handling a situation, then they're curious and they're like, I knew you were a Christian, and
Hmm.
so they but it's so I think that's the biggest part, is just how we're raised. And then, but even if we're not raised in that environment, we still have that choice on how are we going to show up, and are we going to use that as an excuse, how we were raised, or the situations we were put into against our will, whatever. We can use them as a crutch, or we can use them as a tool to move forward.
Oh, that is really good. Most definitely. I think that if the audience could take one thing from you, what you just said there is that if you have a belief in one thing or another, like my audience knows I'm a God girl, I love my
Mm,
God. And yet I try to live my life in a way that people know that without me needing to use words.
right.
So I think that everyone has that same opportunity. Whatever
Hmm.
you are passionate about or believe in, you can be positive about it just in how the way you live your life, and
Hmm.
people will know what you stand for. So that positivity, yeah, you definitely, it was a blessing that you had the mother and father that you had giving
Oh
yourself
yeah.
that start, especially going into law enforcement, because I'll be one of the first to say that it's a very toxic environment.
Hmm.
And that's what we've really been talking about. So I think that having that foundation is really important.
Right.
So because we've talked about it being such a toxic environment, and you were there for 28 years, what are your top couple lessons that you learned while you were in that toxic environment and as you were working your way out of it?
Probably the biggest lesson that I learned was not to give up on people, whether they were employees or citizens that we were working with or whatever. That it's so easy to pigeonhole, and we as police officers were getting pigeonholed, and we still are. All they see is the uniform, but we do that as human beings. We see somebody, and right away, oh, there's a homeless person. Well, how do you know they're homeless? They're sitting on the corner, but our mind goes to a narrative, and we assume that we know everything about this person, and we don't know anything. And it can be a person in a suit carrying a briefcase, and we don't know anything, we know nothing. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that, yes, as a police officer, I had to approach a situation cautiously, but I think that, by going into it and then not jumping to the worst possible case scenario, um, yeah, I'm going to be aware of my surroundings, and we got good at it, didn't we? And like when you're working those night shifts, and man, I could see things that were 3 blocks away going across the street, and so you get really tuned into that. But that's hard to turn it off then too, when you're going to church on Sunday and you're like, what's that person doing? And it borderlines paranoia. And so where do you find that balance? And people say, well, when you get home from your nursing career, or you had a tough day at the office or whatever, just wipe your feet on the doormat and leave your job at work, and then you walk in and it's like, baloney. It doesn't work that way. And but by acknowledging that that was a tough day, whatever it is, whatever line of work you're in, whatever your tough day was, you can acknowledge it, and then you can think, okay, well, what can I even do about it? Is it anything? Yeah, it's raining today. Farmers, I mean, I can't even imagine being a farmer, because it's like everything's out of their control. The cost of equipment and product and everything, and then the weather, of course. But what can we control? How do we control it? And if we can control it, are we going to step up and own it and try to control it? And then just take the outcome for what it is. And so there's a lot of like techniques and tactics we can apply to our lives to to make things motivate, but it all like boils down to us. And when we have that faith and we believe in a higher power, it kind of gives us that confidence, like, well, I'm part of a bigger picture here. I don't know what my part is yet, but just use me as a tool. And my mom used to call us tools, and oh, you're a tool. And now that means something different. Uh, but we all have a gift. We all have something that we can contribute, and 100% of us. So by just right away assuming we know that person and we know what they're up to in their life story, uh, you can stop. And like we talked at the top of this conversation about being curious and genuinely curious. And uh, I used to have a thing about tattoos, and I noticed you have a tattoo on your arm, and yeah, and so like I would assume, there you go, I would assume I know about a person when I saw people, like especially like facial tattoos and neck tattoos. And then I started like approaching them. If I had time and if they were approachable, I would like, if they weren't busy, I'd say, do you remember what your first tattoo was? And watching them light up and kind of go from like, who's this guy coming up to me? And then going, oh yeah, well, I can tell you, I was 16. I had to sneak out of the house, and I can't show you, but and but the excitement and the attachment, the reason that they got that tattoo was burned into their heart. And and once I started and just listening to their response, it helped remind me that I don't know anything about this person
Mm.
unless I ask. And and again, asking in a non-judgmental way. I'm just curious. I don't have a tattoo, but like, do you remember what your first one was? Of course they do. And just it's so I think that's a really good way for us to break down some of that like fear, that paranoia, that, oh, there's the boogeyman over there, he's going to get me. So
Oh, good lesson. Be curious about all the people and ask those questions. Don't be afraid
yeah,
to ask those questions. That is so good.
yeah,
So I know music is a huge part of your life. Can you share more of how it's impacted your journey and exactly
oh,
what you're doing with it now?
yeah, absolutely. I was whistling before I could speak, and I constantly have a tune running through my head, and it's not in like a negative way, like where it's annoying or anything, but there's always a song. My mom used to speak rhythmically to us. She couldn't sing very well, but she would put everything into a rhyme, and our youngest son is his name is Isaac, and so when she'd see Isaac, she'd like Isaac Newton was a tootin' going to the fair, and then you'd ask her, she was a postmaster. She was the first female postmaster in our community, and when she would talk about zip codes, it'd always be 56723, 56, and she would respond rhythmically. So I believe that we're all hardwired some way or another to rhythm and to music. And so I knew at a young age that music was something, and it would trigger emotions in me. Um, and so I started singing at a very young age, and it came easy for me. And then when I talked a little bit about being insecure, and I must have been like in eighth grade, a music teacher said, Tim, you have a nice voice. And it's like the clouds parted, and there was angels singing, and I was like, wow, what now? But I believed him, and then that gave me the confidence to share my voice. And then so I did. I started playing guitar, and in high school we had a little band that we got together, and we were part of like the high school choir, and then a quartet would come out of that choir, and then we would sing like oldie songs like 50s and 60s, and I remember singing "Run Around Sue," and I started with "Here's my story, it's sad but true." And so at 17 years old and doing that, and it was in an auditorium, and one of the adult teachers, a female teacher, went, "Wah!" when I started singing. And I thought, I like that. I like that reaction. And then so the music, when I'm playing now, and I started doing like a one man band show thing. I was still working nights, but we hired a guy to do a neighborhood block party, and I thought I could do that. And so I started playing as a one man band and just doing a couple parties here and there, and it started to grow, and I got some gadgets and different things. I play guitar and harmonica, and I sing, and then it started to morph into like a sideline hustle where it was like, this is fun, as a business. And when I was chief of police, I was doing 130 shows a year that were 4-hour gigs, and it was like and all over the region, and it was amazing. And what was fun about it was, again, I recognized pretty early on that it's not me, it has nothing to do with me up there. When I'm speaking, nothing to do with me. My book has nothing to do with me. It's about the audience, and it's about who's listening. Your podcast, Marci, is not about you, and you
No.
know that. I
Yeah.
know, and you know that. And so when I'm doing music and I'm playing Brown Eyed Girl or whatever the song is, and I'm looking out in that audience and I see somebody that might be having a rotten day, and they're like doing this, and uh, my big turning point in that, I used to get nervous in weddings and funerals singing because it was about me. And I was thinking, oh, what if I goof up? And I played for a 16-year-old girl funeral in our community, and then it hit me like a 2x4 across the face. You knucklehead! It has nothing to do with me. I've been given a gift, and this family through their darkest time has asked me to do a couple songs, and if I could provide an incy bincy little piece of light into that dark day, I'm all in. And uh, and so that's where it really turned around for me, where it was like, okay, I can do something here that's fun for me. I love it, and it can make an impact, an immediate impact on somebody. And I make up a lot of words when I'm doing a live show. I see what's going on around me, and I'll pick somebody out of the crowd, with a Green Bay Packers sweatshirt on or something, and I'll start singing about "Go Pack, go home," and just different things, and have fun, lighthearted fun with people, and it's just that experience. It's just like none other. And I do hospice music, for people at near or at the end of their life, and that came about because I was singing for my mom the moment she passed. I was singing "How Great Thou Art," and my sister was stroking her hair, and she looked up at me and she said, "She's gone. Keep going." And I kept singing, and it was powerful. And the night before my dad passed away, we were all in his room. I had my guitar. We were singing and laughing, and he was in his hospital bed in his bedroom. And I'm sure people driving by would have thought we were. Wait a minute! I thought Kenny was dying. Why are they having a party in there? And that was such a big part of his life and my mom's life, and they were proud of me to sing. And so to share that with my dad just a few hours, and knowing that my dad and then my mom literally went to heaven with the last words she was hearing was me singing. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And so music is powerful. And even if a person doesn't like the genre or the whatever, they don't understand the style of music, whether it's rap music or classical music or jazz or whatever, I believe that we're somewhere in our DNA and our hardwiring. There's something that connects us as people. That part of that is that music. I think that really makes a connection, and I'm honored every time I get a chance to play. I get to play tomorrow for a judge in our area that had been retired for a few years, amazing, powerful, and his wife, I've never even met her, asked me if I would sing a couple songs, fun songs, to celebrate his life. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And so it's a huge honor. I love it. I'll do it till I have no breath, and uh, and even then I may croak out a few songs with my
Nice. I love it. So I heard you say there that you shifted your focus. You shifted your focus from singing for yourself to focusing on who it's really for, and it's who's hearing you, who's
right,
in front of you. So I hear from that it's really important to know why we're focusing on something. Would
right.
you agree with that? And why would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's if our focus is because of us, then and that's part of what journaling does is it helps us get out of that. Uh, but I think if we're constantly focused on us, like oh poor me, why me, and if we do that, it's important to push that back out. I think because when I'm doing something like music, and I'm recognizing that it can make a positive impact on somebody, uh, then that helps me. It helps me. It is figure out helps me figure out my why. Like why am I even doing it? Or um, so I think when we do that, one of the things I recommend people do, and when I'm doing my keynotes, is to write a letter of gratitude to somebody, like a physical pen and paper letter to somebody saying, "Hey, you inspire me, and here's why you inspire me. This is how I feel." And when we do that, when we sit down and force ourselves to write a pen and paper letter, not a text or a tweet or an email, but a pen and paper letter, and then actually send it. I mean, there's studies that are being done that are linking that and correlating that with the effects of Prozac on us as the letter writer. And the letter recipient receives similar effects. And it's because here we are. I have a card in my guitar case right now that was written to me by a dear friend of mine. Her husband was one of my partners and one of my best friends of 19 years. And shortly after I became chief of police, he died by suicide. And and it rocked my world. It changed, I mean, my perspective on so many things. But I keep that card because it's from her. So she's going through one of the worst times of her life, and she writes this thank you card for me singing at my brother's funeral, and she's like focused on me. And I'm reading, and every time I read that, I think, who does that? And but it helped. I'm sure it helped her. Instead of like wallowing in that self pity, she took the time to write me a thank you note. and telling me it must be so challenging for you. I'm like, what? And so as a recipient of that, that fuels me. But I know, like, because I've written similar notes to people and that have inspired me, and it's like when you put that focus on somebody else, and when we put that focus on like God, that and when we reference God and we say that I'm a tool, I am put here for a purpose. Your podcast reached so many people, and because you are using the gifts that you've been given, you're using this beautiful technology that we didn't have however many years ago, and it's crystal clear, and it's like, but you're using it for a bigger purpose, and you're not. And so like you and I, where it's when we do that and push it out on other people, it makes us feel better, but knowing that we're touching lives, and it's when you do that and get off your pity party, then that it helps really turn things around.
Yes, yes. Well, and it also helps us to be able to do things that are uncomfortable when we aren't
Yeah.
doing them for ourselves, that we're doing it for someone else, right?
Hmm.
Because doing this kind of stuff is not the most comfortable thing to do all of the time. I love it now, but in the beginning it was hard.
Oh yeah.
But when I was focused on the heart of it, it was harder. But when I started focusing on the people that I don't even know that it could influence,
Yeah.
it suddenly became more simple.
Yeah.
So your focus is so, so very important. So we have a few minutes left here. I would love for you to share more about your book. Tell us about your book and
Well,
also why the What Now tribe should read it.
yeah. And yeah, you nailed it. I mean, you set it up perfectly with that fear of, oh, you're going out there. And when I started working on the book, it became an extension of my keynotes, and people wanted to know more about Norman, and they want to know about my parents and like what makes me tick, and how can I get through whatever. And so I started writing like 7 years ago. And the first several stories read like a police report. They were horrible. And I was used to, saw subject, arrested, same, and then so I started finding my voice and worked with some coaches, and I started writing more creatively and wanted to share these stories in a more descriptive way, and to help people. Again, that was my focus, is on other people. And so I hired a coach about a year and a half ago, and I sent him all my stories. He asked me, he said, "What's your table of contents?" I'm like, "What's a table of contents?" And because I'm not much of a bookie, I don't read books. I do now. I started at age 50, but so I sent him all my stories. He unraveled them and put them into a better order, and um, when he sent me back my first three chapters, he emailed them to me, and it sat in my inbox, Marci, for 4 days. I couldn't open it. I was scared to death. And my wife was like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, I don't know. And this is a guy that, I mean, put me first through the door on a search warrant or something, with guns out, hostage. I don't care. I mean, I didn't have much fear. And this book scared me because it was very vulnerable. It was very open. I talk about alcohol use. I talk about the mistakes that I've made. I talk about these things, and but 3 days after it became public and people could get their hands on it, I got a message from a friend of mine who's a police chief in a pretty big agency. And he sent me a message. He said, "Brother, I just finished your book. Thank you." And I needed this. And I'm like, and now I'm getting messages from around the world. It's like the most surreal thing, knowing that somebody in Germany is reading my book. Are you kidding me? And and so it's the same thing as music and any art or any like vulnerable thing. Like you said, I'm sure your first several podcasts were like, I'm not sure if I should be doing this, or why am I doing this, and but then you kind of get that momentum, and then when the comments started coming in, I expected comments from people I knew. You kind of like, "Hey, good job, buddy." But then like when you get past that tier, and then you're getting into like people I've never met, I never will meet, and then knowing that this book, Find Your Beat, Walk in the Rhythm of Life, is making an impact. It's like I'm all in again, and it's so giving, and getting opportunities like this to share stories, and that it's like every turn is something new and different and exciting, and learning every single day. Love it. And so my final word to your listeners is, if you have an idea, start journaling, start writing things down. It will help you. And then as you gain confidence, start sharing it with some people, because what your concerns are, guaranteed somebody else is having those same fears and concerns, and you can help other people by doing that. So share,
Yes.
share, share.
Oh, I love that. That was so good, Tim. Thank you so much. And by the way, What Now Tribe, you can grab Tim's book at marcinettles.com/books. It's right there at the bottom of the page. Go and find it and get it and read it and then apply it into your life. And it's going to make a difference. I know that it will. So, Tim, how can they connect with you and follow you?
My website is offdutychief.com. And I'm on all those, not all the social media platforms. I don't know what Twitter is called nowadays. I don't do that one, but X or whatever it is. But I do Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel, or some of my music is on there. And my music is on all the music platforms, Amazon or Spotify or any of those. Just search for Tim Eggebraaten. And then LinkedIn is kind of becoming my go-to resource now for connecting with people. So
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So, by the way, tribe, we've got a freebie for you today. Tim is actually offering you, yes, I know, 3 downloads of his original songs and a synopsis of the tactics he uses to help find his rhythm of life. So make sure that you go to marcinettles.com/freebies to claim the freebie from this episode so that we can get that over to you like today. And by the way, if you like watching videos and if you want to see all the expressions we have as we're doing these amazing interviews, you can actually go to YouTube, Marci Nettles. We are uploading them every time we drop a new episode on an Audible podcast. There will now be the video on YouTube. So Marci Nettles on YouTube. So Tim, thank you so much for being such a fantastic guest today. Thank you for sharing your story, your expertise, and your wisdom. I appreciate you so very much, and I know the tribe does too.
yeah, right back at you, Marcia. You're making a difference, and thank you for doing that. And thank you, tribe members, for tuning in so diligently.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.